Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. You're in for a real treat. I had an opportunity to meet David, and he's a great speaker, and his experiences are remarkable. Thank you. You as a member of Western National Parks Association, we thank you for your support, for staying engaged with us even in these crazy times, and I can't say enough how much we appreciate your dedication to us and of course to our parks. With our 71 national park units that we support, we know that they appreciate your support of the national park system and for being advocates of parks. So speaking of advocates for parks, I can't think of anyone more of an advocate than David, given what he's done. And I'm going to read a little bio, so as a way of introduction, so you'll learn just a little bit more about him, and then we'll get right to the program. So David Kroese left a 25-year career in the corporate world to pursue his personal interests, becoming one of only about 50 people known to have visited all 400 plus National Park Service units in December of 2017. At the insistence of friends and family, David wrote of his experiences in the first published narrative through the NPS sites, the Centennial, A Journey Through America's National Park System. David shares his enthusiasm for our park system in speaking engagements across the country and is currently working on his next book, Hidden Gems of America's National Park System. So with that, David, welcome, and you're all in for a treat. I turn it over to you, sir.
Thanks a lot, Jim. I appreciate the introduction. It has been quite a journey for me to go from park visitor aspirant, trying to see all these places. I always had an interest since I was young in human and natural history. But it was quite an interesting series of events that led me into the park system, and it's more of a full-time thing. And I'll get into that here. I'll share a screen for presentation, and we will start on our way. So as Jim said, my name is David Kroese, and you guys are familiar with the friendly saguaro there. Well, welcoming you to the desert in your backyard, or at least for those in Tucson. I started out on an adventure through the parks because it coincided with my own personal interest in so many ways. And that journey started as a goal back in August 2012, would reach a culmination in December of 2017. At the time, there were 417 park units, and my last one happened to be reconstruction area. It's now National Historical Park. Then it was National Monument, where I finished up with my wife there, Corrine. She's been to about 200 of the parks, so I've drug her along, and as well, over time, she's grown to love them quite a lot herself. But while I was on this journey, I was struck by a lot of different things, not just the parks themselves, but also how kind people were to me across the country. And so during the Centennial, I wanted to do a few things. I wanted to continue furthering my goal to visit all the parks. I wanted to celebrate the Centennial itself, but perhaps most importantly, I wanted to find some project to say thank you to all the people in the parks, the park personnel across the country who had done so much to help me and do the same for millions of others every year. And so when both Western National Parks Association and Eastern National participated heavily in the promotional campaigns, the Find Your Park and Centennial promotions, this created almost or over 60% of the park system was represented by various items that were part of these promotions, and included amongst those were lapel pins that had the unit name on them. Many of you probably have seen these before or might have some of your own. But because of the two largest associations being participants, that meant that 248 NPS locations across 46 states and territories were represented in these two sets. nearly 500 pins in total. And I made my modest project a mission to say thank you, a mission to go about the parks, collect these full sets in 2016, have them professionally framed, and give them back to the Park Service for a traveling exhibit. These will eventually come to Tucson on their tour through the country. They're currently in their 4th year in the parks and at their 15th park host, Ulysses S. Grant National Historic Site here in St. Louis, where I'm speaking to you from today. So while I was busy doing that project, seeing parks, returning to parks I had seen before, to see new things that are other things that I might have missed, I was posting picture summaries across social media and sharing them whenever I could about all these incredible things I was seeing. And my friends and family started repeatedly asking me, are you going to share this in some more formal way? I said, well, what do you mean? And I said, are you going to write about what you're doing? Before the Centennial year was up, I actually ended up making it to 387 of the 400 plus MPS units. That took me through all 50 states in the Caribbean. Now, only 76 of those were first visits. They were slower. The other ones were revisits, and sometimes they were much shorter if I had seen a park 6 times already. But as it would, it made for a very interesting story to include all of the parks in one narrative. So when I recognized that nothing like this existed, what they were really asking me to do, I agreed that I would sit down and try to put all this in writing, what had happened to me in 2016 and 17 when I finished up the parks. And so that's where the book came about. That has in turn led me into other projects. And the great thing about having some experience at all 400 plus parks is the variety of themes and topics are nearly limitless. And today we're going to talk about some of the trails in the parks. These vary from anywhere from a half mile to almost 20 miles in length. So I wasn't trying to necessarily pick the most challenging trails, but I wanted to pick a selection of trails from the western area of the lower 48 that I thought had some exceptional value in seeing or understanding the park in which they reside. So without further ado, one of my favorite parks, and one I consider to be at the very top, a great example of a hidden gem in our park system, is one familiar to many of you, Chiricahua National Monument. They're right there in southern Arizona. Chiricahua is a place that almost defies description. I read about this park before I visited. I was in no way prepared for what I was going to see when I got into the park. One of the best ways to explore Chiricahua is on the 7.3 mile Heart of the Rocks trail. You can actually get to the Heart of the Rocks or walk the center loop of the Heart of the Rocks from 2 different directions. You can climb up from the visitor center, or you can walk down from the park road and from a higher elevation. But it is a great way to experience Chiricahua. Plan on spending the better part of the day enjoying these views, one after the other, of one of the most remarkable parks in our system. And you get to see rock features like this. Again, this is on a lot of postcards and other items that you can buy through Western National. This is the Pinnacle Balanced Rock, one of the more famous rock features that you see while you're on the Heart of the Rocks Trail in Chiricahua. Another Western National Park, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and I'd like to explore in more detail. A side note here, most, if not all of these parks have hundreds of miles of trails, dozens upon dozens of different opportunities for hiking, and there are always spectacular trails opportunities. Nobody's ever walked all of them, I don't believe. I don't believe that's even humanly possible, but everybody might have their favorites. And for me, these are the ones that I had a chance to experience myself, and I thought I would do this again in a heartbeat, walking these trails, because I thought they were that interesting. This particular one is one of the views that you get from here. You're looking directly down at Scorpion Ranch, which is on the island of Santa Cruz in Channel Islands National Park. Santa Cruz is the largest island of the 5 of the park, and it's the second easternmost to Anacapa, which is just a smaller island a short distance away. But this is the most common tour that runs out of Ventura Harbor. Come over to Santa Cruz, land at Scorpion Ranch, and explore the island from there. It's only the east end of the island that's actually accessible to the public. The rest of it is a preserve, which is protected and not accessible to the general public. But there's a wonderful opportunity here to leave Scorpion Ranch and the scenery, climb above it, cross the island to the south, and check out Smuggler's Cove, a little inlet that's on the bottom end, and you get some great coastal views of not only the east end of the island, but the island of Anacapa across the way. And you can also see Santa Monica Mountains in the distance. Another one of my favorites, and this isn't for the hiking or exercise, but for the experience and the geology that you see, is the Earthquake Trail in Point Reyes National Seashore. And here you're looking at a reconstructed section of a farmer's fence that was split by 16 feet during the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. That little blue pole in the background over my wife's left shoulder marks the center line of the San Andreas Fault, which cuts right across the base of the peninsula. Point Reyes is a remarkable park when you realize, standing on this peninsula, that it's moved north since this rock emerged almost 300 miles. So it sits on the edge of the Pacific Plate, which along the main fault boundaries has scooted it north near about 280 miles. The conglomerate rock on Point Reyes National Seashore doesn't match anything in mainland California where it currently sits. Its geological match rests south in Malibu. So it gives you an idea of the power of tectonic action and the San Andreas Fault and its other, that family of faults that mark the North American Plate and Pacific Plate boundary. This is another favorite. There are multiple vantages to explore and see Bighorn Canyon. This is another one that I would consider to be an excellent example of a hidden gem. Many people, unless you really spend some time in the park, a couple of days to start, to see not only the great views of the canyons that make up the park, this being the main canyon or Bighorn Canyon itself, but also some of the history around the park, like the different ranches, historical ranches that you can find, the old Native American encampments that rest down the heights, and so much more. There's so much to see. One of the best ways to see Bighorn Canyon is to combine the look you have here. This is a panoramic view of the edge, from the top of the edge of the canyon at Sullivan's Knob, which is a really nice offshoot. It's not even marked on all the park maps, but you can get a trail map from the visitor center, which will tell you where Sullivan's Knob is. A little sign off the park road, and it's a short loop, less than a mile long, that takes you along the edge of this cliff around Bighorn Canyons for some excellent views of the canyon. And then that partnered with taking a boat trip up from the marina and actually exploring the canyon up to the confluence of Devil's Canyon and Bighorn Canyon, that really gives you a great pair of experiences to see this park in all its glory. Another favorite view, this one comes from Harper's Corner in Dinosaur National Monument, which is yet another hidden gem on my list. So here you're seeing from above the confluence of the Yampa and Green Rivers. The Yampa comes in top right on your screen from the east, and the Green is coming in on the top left, turns the corner, and they meet at just past this shipwreck rock here down next to the combined green, which is in the foreground here in the picture. This is one of a series of views you get elevated above this river confluence from the edge of Harper's Corner, which is a 3-mile round trip hike out to the edge of the cliff and back, and it gives you this view of the interior of the park and the canyons that exist within it. There's so much to explore in Dinosaur. A lot of people float down the rivers, but one way or the other, checking out these canyons is quite an experience. And then of course you have the paleontology on top of that. at one of the most impressive, if not arguably the greatest late Jurassic period fossil bed on the planet Earth, which is just over in the state line in Utah. So this is another favorite and another hidden gem, but one of the many views that you find if you decide to climb the Serpents Trail, which is a 3.5-mile round trip up and back trail. It gains about 700 feet in elevation, and it's the original park road that accessed the rim of the canyon on the plateau. Colorado National Monument is essentially a series of box canyons that rest on the edge of the Uncompahgre uplift, which stands above the Grand Valley and Grand Junction, the town of Grand Junction down below. Of course, in modern times, a lot of people don't remember or realize that the Colorado River used to be known as the Grand River. And so where its confluence with the Gunnison happens down in the valley, that was Grand Junction. And then the valley below stretches out, pointing the other way from this picture, all the way to the Book Cliffs, 80 to 100 miles across the way. So the series of looks that you get of Grand Mesa, the valley, and the interior of Colorado National Monument from this trail are extraordinary. Well worth the 3.5 miles of walking. This is one of the many, this is a picture I took and used in my book, first book at Craters of the Moon, when we were exploring the lava tubes in the park. And they call this, they call a series of lava tubes and a trail you can take through them the cave tour, which alternates between going underground into the tubes and going up on the surface. When I put this picture in the book, I actually captioned it, "What comes out of a lava tube?" So Craters of the Moon is quite an extraordinary park, and again, another one on my hidden gems list. Here, you might recognize this. Many of you will recognize this, the famous waterfall. This is Vernal Falls in Yosemite National Park. And if you want to get a close-up look of this, like you see in the picture, then the trail for you is the Mist Trail. But if you want a 2-for-1 and a great day of exercise and amazing scenery, then you want to combine this close-up encounter with the Vernal Falls with one of Nevada Falls. And you can do that by climbing up the Mist Trail and then walking over the top of Nevada Falls that you see here in the picture. And you're looking at the back of Half Dome there in your picture, along with the other peaks near to the falls. When you walk up above the falls, you can connect with the John Muir Trail, which is a much longer through trail that goes all the way through the park. And John Muir connects up with the Pacific Crest Trail and so on and so forth. But you can catch a short section of that to form an 8-mile loop, which climbs about 2,000 feet in elevation to move all the way past Vernal Falls and Nevada Falls and get to the point that we're at in this particular picture. Some great scenery of the Yosemite Valley and the two falls and some of the granite monoliths there in the park from that trail and loop. Redwoods National Park, national and state parks is a place that I could literally spend hours and not realize it. I just find these woods enchanting. These trees, when you walk through, you've got the cool, moist air coming in off the ocean. The trails have, in many cases, feet of needles that have fallen off the trees, so it kind of walks like a cushioned carpet. So you're walking on this bed of needles around these ancient giants, and it's just a remarkable place. A great place to get started in exploring Redwood is Stout Grove. There's a short trail that goes through the heart of the grove that's less than a mile or about a mile long, but then that connects to other trails that you can follow along the creek that runs nearby or into other parts or other groves of the system. But definitely it's a great place to introduce yourself to the Redwoods or to explore while you're at Redwoods National Park. The road that accesses it is, well, it was the last time there was a gravel road that not all vehicles can get down. So it gives you a little bit more of a individual feel for the park, not quite as crowded as some of the places that are directly off the coastal highway. This is a picture, one of the many views that you get as you travel up Rocky Mountain National Park's Wild Basin. Wild Basin is a specific entrance into the park in the southeast area of Rocky Mountain National Park. You can walk back into this basin from the Wild Basin trailhead and head to many different destinations. The one that I did happened to be to Ouzel Lake, which is about a 10-mile round trip, and it climbs about 1,500 feet during that 10 miles, or the 5 miles out, I should say. But you go past several waterfalls on the way, and you get a great look at the interior of the mountains and some of the peaks around you. Many people extend this hike. There's several alternatives in Wild Basin. The longest one is to go all the way to Bluebird Lake, which is a 14-mile round trip in the heart of the basin, kind of with these peaks that you see in the foreground. In the background here, they're surrounding you when you go all the way up to Bluebird Lake at their base. A lot of people don't explore Wild Basin, and they're missing something. It's an extraordinary part of many extraordinary areas and a very special park. This may be a familiar scene to you. This is a panoramic view of the top of High Dune, which, well, it's the second highest dune in Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve. It's 699 feet high. It actually offers the highest perspective in the dune field because Star Dune, the higher dune, 750 or 50 feet roughly, is farther out in the valley, where the valley is dropping down from the mountains. So it starts at a lower base. Its base is low enough that the peak of Star Dune is actually a little bit lower than High Dune. So climbing up to High Dune is one of the most popular activities in Great Sand Dunes. It's about a 3-mile round trip. Of course, as I said, or 2.5 actually. As I said, you have to climb about 700 feet. It is on sand, and there are parts of it, you have to contend with that. It could also be very hot on the dunes. So you have to keep that in mind depending on the time of year. But it is well worth the effort to get up to the top of the dune field and take a look around. It's a perspective that's very special, and that was my favorite experience in Great Sand Dunes. This may be another trail that's familiar to you. I wish we had more participation here and you guys could shout them out, because I'm sure many of you know these trails. But this is a shot on the Ring Trail in Mojave National Preserve. So the Ring Trail is only about a mile or so loop that you go around the hole in the wall area of the park. Basically a giant rock with eroded holes in it. Well, the Park Service has anchored some metal rings into one of these passages through the rock, so that a trail runs through and up into this rock. So you're at the base of the rock when you walk around behind it, and you climb up through it, and you end up closer to the top of the rock. Not the very summit, but you're at a higher elevation as you climb through the rocks. And it's a lot of fun to pull your way up through these rings. It's kind of a fun challenge. So this is one of the many views that force you to stop and look when you're climbing the Cascade Pass Trail in North Cascades National Park. Well, a lot of people head out to explore North Cascades. North Cascades National Park is actually the North Cascades National Park complex. Has 3 units: the Ross Lake National Recreation Area toward the north, North Cascades, the heart of the park proper, in the middle, and then Lake Chelan National Recreation Area in the south end, which is another hidden gem in the park system and extraordinary. But only one road actually enters the boundary of North Cascades National Park proper. The US highway that goes through the park actually stays within Ross Lake NRA the entire time. So to get into the actual national park, the easiest directly accessible way is to go on Cascade Pass Road to this Cascade Pass trailhead. And once you're there, you can climb up to Cascade Pass. Be prepared to walk across a snow field, even if you're there in the summer, because some of that snow never completely leaves. If you do the whole trail, it's 16.6 miles round trip with 5,100 feet of elevation gain. So just keep that in mind. You don't have to do the whole trail to get some outstanding views. This picture was taken, I believe, within the first 1,000 feet of elevation gain on the trail, and mile or mile and a half. That is a great way to see the interior of the Cascade Mountains and the North Cascades. And in my opinion, the North Cascades are the closest thing that the lower 48 have to the feeling, the views, scenery you get in the interior of Alaska. So this is one of the many views that you get from another one of my park favorites. This is the top of Sandstone Peak in Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area. And it sits at a place called Circle X Ranch. It used to be a Boy Scout camp, to my knowledge. But I think it's just a really neat thing that you can climb up. This is the highest point in the park at 3,111 feet in elevation. And it's a nice, easy hike of only about 3 miles round trip. You gain 1,081 feet of elevation to get up to this peak, which is also called Mount Allen. But you get up to this peak, you look across the Santa Barbara Channel, and you're looking directly at the Channel Islands. So what you see in front of you there in the middle of the picture is Anacapa and Santa Cruz. And then I happen to do these parks, my first visits, on back-to-back days. So I was on top of Sandstone Peak looking at Santa Cruz, and then the next day I was on that trail to Smuggler's Cove looking back at this same point. So I had photos separated by 30 miles or whatever of the 2 points from either end. But quite a spectacular range of scenery from this climb up to the top of Sandstone Peak in Santa Monica Mountains National Rec Area. There's a lot of great hiking in that park, but this was the first trail that I tackled, and so far my favorite. This is one of my favorite park system panoramas. One of the many views that you get from Dante's View in Death Valley National Park. And there's actually a ridge trail, Dante's Ridge, which is an 8-mile trail that runs on the crest of the Amargosa Mountains, which line the east side of the valley. So you have the Amargosa and the Panamint Mountains running parallel to each other with Death Valley in between. Death Valley is our largest park in the lower 48 at 3.4 million total acres. So it's a massive valley, but you can literally see 100 miles into the distance when you get up to these peaks. And it can be quite chilly there, even when it's warm in the valley. So keep that in mind when you get up to the height. Death Valley has both the lowest and highest points in the Mojave Desert. At Badwater Basin, in the lowest point in North America, and then one of the peaks in the Panamints reaches 11,000 feet. So Death Valley is a place of extraordinary extremes and contrasts. It is a very unique bundle, but just a chance to see for several hours these kinds of panoramas over the valley is extraordinary. And at a minimum, it's definitely worth spending some time at Dante's View. This is another Western National Partner Park. This is a view from the top of Inscription Rock at El Morro in New Mexico. So Inscription Rock, of course, was infamous because of all the carvings on it, historical carvings, dating back as far as early Spanish explorers and the first European-based peoples to come into the area. But then there's inscriptions from all stages of history in this area, from settlers, army that passed through. There's a water supply spring near the rock, which is what drew so many people over such a long period of time to this location. So they would come there to water their animals, get some water for themselves in a relatively dry or arid area in New Mexico, and then they'd leave a note behind on Inscription Rock. So it's an amazing historical record as you go past the base. It's a short little trail to go past all of the inscriptions, but then you round the corner and then you can climb up to the top of the rock and visit two Native American dwellings that sit on either side of where this picture was taken. Now, this is a trail that I didn't get to complete, but I will return to this park, complete this trail, one, because it's extraordinary and I love the views from the trail, but two, because I just have to. And I'll explain why. This is a picture from and of the Lehman Creek Trail in Great Basin National Park. So the Lehman Creek Trail runs 6.8 miles round trip, climbs just over 2,000 feet, 2,050 feet. And this picture you see on your right, I was here at the end of March, climbing up the side of Wheeler Peak, which goes as high as summits at 13,065 feet. But I was a little over 8,000 feet here into the snow. Being late March, the snow hadn't melted yet. I rounded the corner in this picture and I ran face to face into a full-grown mountain lion who was blocking the trail, standing perpendicular to the trail. So this cat had heard me coming up the trail. I'm sure I wasn't very stealthy or quiet, and it decided it was going to see who I was, whether I was lunch, and let me know that it was there. Because cats, if they're just simply, if they're only hunting and they're hunting a prey animal, they're not going to let you know they're there ahead of time. They will attack from cover. They'll usually attack from height. They'll leap at their prey and they'll try to grab it in the neck and snap its neck if they can. They want as quick and risk-free kill as they can possibly get. So this cat wasn't necessarily trying to hunt me. It might have if it was an opportunity. It mostly wanted to see what I was and let me see it. So we had a good old-fashioned standoff in the trail there, and needless to say, that was as high as I climbed on the Lehman Creek Trail. But hopefully I can return and enjoy these wonderful views from the side of Wheeler Peak of the Great Basin Desert, which stretches out around the peak and its shoulder peaks for miles and miles on end. What a scenic park. This is another surprising location that I thoroughly enjoyed. And a lot of people miss this spot, but this is a picture, and many of you probably recognize it, of Montezuma Well, which is part of Montezuma Castle National Monument. Many people stop at Montezuma Castle. It's pretty convenient to the interstate on the way up to Flagstaff or down to Phoenix. But they see the beautiful large ruins that are up in the cliff, the Montezuma Castle itself, and then read a bit of the history and probably move along. And a lot of people don't go over and check out Montezuma Well, where you can actually get very close to some of the ruins that were built into the side of this rock, which holds the water. But the whole trail experience is, I think, pretty extraordinary and gives you a much closer look at both the Native American history and some of the natural geological features of the park and area. So I highly recommend checking out. It's a short 1 mile loop trail to walk through and around Montezuma Well. Here we're returning to Bighorn Canyon National Recreation Area. And one of the many features within the park that I enjoyed so much, this is the main house at the Lockhart Ranch. Carolyn Lockhart was considered or called the cattle queen of the West. She earned quite a bit of fame in the early 1900s as a thrill writer, if you will, for newspapers and periodicals. So she covered a lot of dramatic events. This is all concurrent in history with the muckraking and all the other, kind of an early version of shock journalism. So Carolyn Lockhart was in that wrote novels of her own right, but her biggest passion in life was a desire to move out west and have a cattle ranch. And she did this very thing on ground that is now part of Bighorn Canyon National Recreation Area. And going to visit this, the remaining cabin, the Park Service is steadily restoring it to put it back into the shape that it was. But most of the original buildings are still there on site, and you can explore amongst them. There's several ranches in the park you can explore. I think this one's the most interesting because Carolyn Lockhart's story is the most interesting. Then one of the others is now currently occupied by more than its fair share of rattlesnakes. So you don't have so much of that problem. Another thing about the Carolyn Lockhart Ranch is there's an old Indian buffalo jump right next to the property. So as you're walking to or from it, if you look to the side, you'll see this high cliff. It almost looks like a runway of a cliff. Well, the Plains Indians, the Crows and others who occupied this area would use that as a buffalo jump. It was one of the ways that they hunted buffalo in quantity in a time-efficient way. Not very good for the bison, but very good for the hunters. Kind of interesting to see one of the locations where that actually occurred. There's another spot I mentioned earlier that was a perennial encampment in Bighorn Canyon. It's called the Two Circles area, but there are teepee rocks that were used to hold down the base of the teepee all around this area, and the rocks are quite large, so they organized them in circles, and they're still there. So you can go there and walk amongst these rocks that were used several hundred years ago by the Plains Indians who returned to this campsite year after year, in part for the hunting and for other reasons. So here we have, many people probably recognize this, but here we have Capulan Volcano. So we've returned to the southwest again, and Capulan Volcano is quite a scenic, our classical shield volcano. The inside of Capulan Volcano, there are two trails that let you see the volcano close. The rim trail, which is a mile loop around the top of the crater of Capulan Volcano. And then there's a short trail that's only less than half a mile down and back, down to the vent of this extant volcano. But this is one of the higher and more scenic volcanoes in the Clayton Raton volcanic field, which is actually enormous in size. So that covers the lion's share of almost all of northeastern Mexico, and about 800 square miles in size. So this volcano is amongst several others. When you get up to the top of Capulan, you can look out into the volcano field and you can clearly see numerous other cones, cinder cones, all around you in different volcanic remnants. So you can literally see that you're in the middle of a volcano field. This is one of our newest, I guess our newest national park is designated by Congress. The park formerly known as White Sands National Monument, now White Sands National Park. This is one of the many views that you get from the Alkali Flat Trail, which is a great way to explore White Sands. So the Alkali Flat Trail is a 5-mile trail across the dunes. Others may feel differently, but I find that the gypsum dunes that make up White Sands are much easier to hike over than, say, the regular silica sand dunes like at Great Sand Dunes, or Indiana Dunes, or Sleeping Bear Dunes. This gypsum that's gathered here for this to make up this dune field holds more water than regular sand, so it tends to harden up a bit more, and it's more solid underfoot. When you're going up the side of a dune, it'll still give way on you, but when we're on the crest of the dune, it's a fairly stable, solid walking surface. So it's not quite as exhausting, though like any other sand dune, it gets very, very hot, if you're on the dunes in the heat of the day or in the summer. And you certainly don't want to be there when a thunderstorm comes up over the mountains. That's the last place you want to be. That actually happened to me when I hiked this trail. I was about at the turnaround point, the farthest point on the trail, and I see a thunderstorm coming up over the mountains into the valley, and no place to go but return with all due haste, because you do not want to be on a sand dune in the middle of a thunderstorm. You never want to be less than the top of the food chain, and you never want to be the highest point when lightning is striking. This is another one of the many, many great views that you get in the park system. Another Western National Partner Park, Curricanti National Recreation Area, and this is Curricanti Creek from up above it, running into the Gunnison in the midst of the East Portal. So both Black Canyon of the Gunnison features 14 miles of the 48-mile beautiful Black Canyon, and then the Eastern Portal, our entrance that is increasing in steepness or depth of canyon, is part of Curricanti National Recreation Area. It can be explored from either the west or the east. But this is a very challenging trail that drops. It's not very long. It's only about 4 miles round trip. And that drop looks really intimidating. It's only about 900 feet. I can tell you it feels like it's more than 900 feet, because you get down to the bottom near the Gunnison and you're climbing up over some rock falls and some quite large rocks. So you're navigating across some a little bit more difficult terrain as you make your way all the way to the river, but definitely a very beautiful and scenic spot. And then its sister park, Black Canyon of the Gunnison, I couldn't leave that out. A great way to see Black Canyon. Most visitors to Black Canyon explore the South Rim. That's where the main visitor center is, the main park road that goes to all the named overlooks. And those are some great views, definitely worthwhile. But I think that the most spectacular part of Black Canyon of the Gunnison is on the North Rim. And that's where you get views like this from Exclamation Point, a view of the river coming right at you through the heart of the canyon. Exclamation Point is on the hike up to Green Mountain from the small ranger station that's at the North Rim. So that's about a total round trip all the way to the summit of Green Mountain, about 7 miles, I believe. That one I didn't write down, but the Exclamation Point's only about a mile and a half round trip and back to see views like this. And then the Chasm view, which requires no hiking at all, is right there at the campground on the North Rim. And that's also well worth seeing. But here was a sampling of different parks throughout the park system. Some of the Western National units featured. I'm sure that many of you have your own favorites. When I was originally building this list, I made a list throughout representing the entire park system of 60 hikes that I wanted to highlight as far as their incredible, not just incredible scenery and views or great panoramas, but also the aspect of their host park that the visitor got to enjoy while doing the hike. And it's partially about getting fresh air, but it's also understanding why each of these places is so special. And if you can find the trail that takes you there, that's a wonderful thing. So any questions? If we can do that with the chat format. I should add, those that are interested a little bit about my story, this top website, centennialjourney.com, has some static pages which share that, and also give a little bit of that. While I was working my way through the park system, within the last decade, I've logged something like 1,400 separate visits to our national park units. And I've tried to chronicle those through pictures. I have something north of 50,000 different pictures from throughout the park system. I try to feature those as time goes on the Facebook page for the Centennial, the book that is. And then I often comment about the level of resource that the National Park Travelers Club provides for the park enthusiast and park traveler. The NPTC, the people of the NPTC really helped me explore the parks by being able to answer a lot of questions I had, help me plan my visits, understand what it was I was trying to do and explore. So along with the National Park Service, they were a great help. And that's
Well, great. Thank you so much, Dave. And we do have a couple questions, but I did want you to maybe explain a little bit about who the National Park Travelers Club is, and a little bit more about them and their self-proclaimed stamping nerds, right? I'm one of them.
yes. So I see a couple of questions on the side here, and I see the one on the bottom, and I'll scroll up for any more. But and thank you everybody for attending today, and thanks to Western National for hosting. I meant to mention earlier about that project I did that's been in the parks for 3.5 years or so. Western National actually directly helped me complete that, as did Eastern and the National Park Service. When they understood what I was trying to do, the idea was to create a complete collection of those two sets and give them back to the Park Service so they would have it for posterity. And they will eventually go on permanent display somewhere in the system. But the whole idea was thank you, not just to the rangers, but also to the folks at places like the WNPA who make these parks run. So they were very, very kind and supportive. It's been wonderful to work with them. What was your toughest trail? I see that question. So the answer for me is the Bonanza Mine Trail in Wrangell, St. Elias, which climbs up from Kennecott Mountain. It has an elevation gain of 3,800 feet in less than 7 miles. I think it's a 9-mile round trip hike. Yeah, 9-mile round trip hike. So you're going up 4.5 miles, 3,800 feet in elevation. And if you're familiar with elevation change in distance, there's a lot of rise for not a lot of run there. So you're basically climbing and climbing. You're at high altitude or high elevation. You're dry. You consume 3 times as much water as you think you ought to. Now you get up there, you get views of the glaciers coming past Kennecott and the mountains around you. It's spectacular. So there's a great payoff to get up to the mine, but it's painful. So that would be, for me personally, probably one of my toughest trails that I've tackled in the park system. And I can't wait to go back and maybe be a little smarter and bring 2 or 3 times the water I did the first time. Would I choose the parks on the eastern or western side of the U.S.? Oh, I wouldn't choose between them because you have an emphasis on human history on the east side, and you have all this natural history on the west side. So you have so much remarkable that's going on, and actually in the hidden gems, they show up all over the place in the system, places that you're not ready for until you see them. So let me. Let's see. Were there any other questions that I missed? Do I address accessibility issues in my book? No, I tell the story. So what I tried to do with the Centennial, there was no narrative or any kind of story that existed that included all 400 plus parks in the system. There were several books that talked about the national parks as designated by Congress, whether they be 58 or now 62 is the current number. And some of those are great stories, they're great books, nothing wrong with that. But I felt that by leaving out the other 360, I mean, most of the really shocking surprises were in some of these parks I'd never heard of. All I knew about Chiricahua was there was an Apache tribe with that name. So I had no idea what I was about to see, even though I'd read the brochure before I went and some other materials, looked at the website. I had no idea. So so I thought I wanted to write something that would take people through the system, introduce it to them in a story, and share some of the extraordinary things that happened to me, like that face-to-face encounter with a mountain lion, and then also answer a few questions about how you see some of these places. How do you get to Kobuk Valley, or how do you go to the gates of the Arctic? And while I'm at it, give people a feel for how they might get to some of these places and navigate through the system. So basically, it was the book that I wish I could have read before I had started, was what I tried to write in the first book. Yeah, Great Basin is a fantastic park. And so is Death Valley is one of my favorites, if I'll be honest. No matter how I would divide the parks, it would be one of my favorites. I think the scenery, you have the artist palette, you have the view, Dante's view, that view up and down the valley, the Doubles Golf Course, Badwater Basin, the dunes, the racetrack. You can go on forever listing the features in Death Valley that are worth exploring, and they're all remarkable. So it really is a special place. Not a place I'd recommend to go in July or August, though. March is a great time to go. Big Bend is also very scenic.
We have one question here, David. What park would you say that you visited the most? And can you say any parks that you wish that you could go back to?
Oh yeah, so of the 422 current units, I've been able to visit over 320 of them 2 or more times. So there's about 100, and I'm about 12 or 1300 park visits since I started making my mission in life in August 2012. So in the last 8+ years, I spent a lot of time in the parks. But there are 100 I haven't gone back to, and it was not because of interest, it's because of opportunity. What I always considered my first trips through the park system to be a scouting tour, because I felt like you had to know what you were trying to see, or see it a little bit, before you could really do an intelligently, the comprehensive plan for a visit. And that's what I've been doing with my more recent visits. I've been to some of these parks over a dozen times. Actually, because I come to St. Louis to watch baseball games, I've been to Gateway Arch probably a few hundred times. Because I'll wander over and walk around the arch a little bit, even when I'm going to a baseball game, get a little exercise. But I'm getting up into 6, 7, 8 visits for some of these parks, and then others, 2 or 3, and trying to get back to a few that I've only seen once. So yeah, other than that, there's just so many things to explore in these places, and everybody has their own specific. I just leave with this: that everybody has their own specific way. Personally, I reject the idea that everybody has to see a park like I do. I think these places are special because they communicate to us in a personal way. And that is by its nature definition unique to that individual. So how they relate to a park, I did an op-ed for the online magazine National Park Traveler, and in it I closed with a comment that a park, the title was, "What is a park visit?" And I closed with, "A park is visited when it speaks to our heart and leaves something more in it than we had when we arrived." And I guess I'd leave you with that thought.
Yeah, wow, what a great final thought, Dave. Thank you so much. I know Caroline will wrap this up in a moment, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your love of the national parks, your wonderful insights today. I learned a lot, and I thought I knew a lot about parks. I'm double down enthusiastic about getting back on the road and visiting some parks that I haven't been to, and I've been to quite a few, but you've definitely lit another fire. I'm going to recommend to everybody to check out the National Park Travelers Club. Dave's very involved in the club, and if you ever want to hang out with a whole bunch of park groupie type folks like Dave, that's the place. Caroline and I had a chance to interact a couple years, well, a year and a half ago, I guess now, and what a wonderful group of people, and you know, very diverse, and people coming at it from different perspectives, but you'll really enjoy the group. Well, Dave, thank you so much for being part of WNPA and for all that you do to advocate for parks and share your love, because we need to share more love and get more people enthusiastic about parks.